Mark Mobius is now joining us. He's chairman at Mobius Emerging Opportunities Fund. Mark, great to see you in the new year, 2025. This is Prashant here. Happy New Year to you, your family, your team. It's always sort of great to get you for our viewers on CNBC TV18.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year to you. I'm now in Australia, appropriately on the Gold Coast. So I hope everybody will end up with a lot of gold at the end of the year.
Absolutely, that's well put, and we're looking forward with hopeful kind of views here. Mark, so let's begin the conversation set us up in terms of what your sort of bigger, broad, top-down thoughts are. Is this going to be a slightly tougher? You've been a big bull on India through 2023, 24, but I think towards the end, you moderated that view a little bit, if I'm not wrong. How are things looking, especially sort of EMs and, of course, India then specifically as a market?
Well, of course, as you know, the Indian rupee has gotten weaker against the U.S. dollar, and that's a factor for U.S. investors. They have to look at that factor, what the impact on their portfolios will be. But I think the rupee value of the index will more than make up for these devaluation of the rupee against the U.S. dollar. And I think going forward, you're going to see a very good market in India. And India, I believe, is going to benefit from the Trump administration simply because, first of all, the Trump administration will not favor the Chinese market. And if you look at the global picture, where else can investors go overseas? Where are the best places? And India comes up all the time because of the incredible growth of the country, because of the reforms that are taking place under the current government, and simply because there's so much value in the market, companies with very high return on capital, etc. So I'm continuing to be optimistic about India generally.
Okay. Good morning, Mark. I think it's good afternoon for you in Australia. Thank you again for joining us, and a Happy New Year. Does U.S. exceptionalism continue, and for how long do you think? Because even if India has its positives, it's just such a big magnet when the currency is strong. Yields over there are 4.5%, and the IT stocks are, they've given over 20% gains no matter which index you pick. So when do you see that exceptionalism peaking off or even waning?
Well, first of all, you must remember, if a country is growing at 6, 7, 8%, whatever number you want to pick, companies will be growing at double at the rate. Good companies that have a high return on capital will be growing at double that rate. So you're talking about 14, 15, even 20%. So an increase in price of 20% more than accommodates the kind of increase in value that you have in these stocks. So I don't think we should be too worried about the fact that many of these stocks have gone up so much. They will continue to go up if these earnings continue to go in the direction that we've seen them. The other factor I think is very important, and that is for those companies that are exporting, let's say Infosys that exports a lot of software, they are going to become more competitive because of the weakening rupee. So I think you've got to look at many of these stocks that have a US dollar income component will continue to do very, very good. And I think we're on this cusp of more exports coming out of India, not only in the software area, but also in manufacturing.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Mark. Good morning and good to see you in. This is Nigel on this side. Mark, besides being born in the 1980s, I missed out that entire Reaganomics that everyone talks about. It's supposed to be a golden period for the US economy as well as, everything did well out there. Now people are looking forward to Trumpnomics 2.0 and they believe it's going to be as good. What's your view? Given this sort of a backdrop, this sort of expectations, what would your allocation be? I recall a few months ago, you were saying if you had $100, 50% would come to India, some to China, and that did bounce. But currently, if you had $100, what would it be?
Well, the 50% number is still, pretty much on the mark of what I would like to see. Of course, when you're doing a portfolio that has to be diversified. You can't put that much in one portfolio, but it'll certainly be 20, 30% in that range. But my personal desire is to be 50% in India. Now, let's look at the Trump administration. What is going to happen? First of all, Trump is going to lower taxes. Secondly, he's going to cut out a lot of the bureaucracy and a lot of the paperwork, a lot of the impediments to doing business in America. This is going to be very, very good, not only for American industry, but for foreign industries. Because you must remember, if you cut out a lot of this bureaucracy, it'll be easier for Indian companies to do business in America. So this is going to be a big boost, not only for the US, but for the world. And by the way, I think there's also going to be a demonstration effect where countries around the world look at the US, see the way the bureaucracy is being cut, see the way that the budget is being saved from the wasteful spending, and they're going to think, hey, maybe we should be doing that as well. So it's going to be a very, very interesting development going forward. And I think India stands to benefit probably more than any other country in the world because they are the natural choice after China for manufacturing. And of course, the reforms that are taking place under Modi are having a big, big impact and will do, it's going to be a very, very, very good partnership that India will have with the US.
Okay. That's good to hear that, Mark. But what will you prefer in India? There is also a domestic pain point in terms of urban consumption slowing. We saw it in the FMCG company numbers, microfinance loans defaults, and the latest December numbers for two-wheelers also are not very heartening. So which part of India do you buy?
Well, first of all, I would look at export-oriented companies to begin with because of the currency situation, and also simply because India is gradually becoming more and more competitive against the Chinese exporters. That's number one. But also, you must remember that India continues to have a per capita income rise. So I'm not writing off the consumer-oriented industries, which includes housing, it includes consumer products, et cetera, because you've got an incredible value. When I travel around the world, I see more and more Indian tourists coming in. Here in Australia, I was just in Sydney, they were full of Indian tourists. Of course, India itself, my trip here last year through India, I was having to wait in line because there's so many Indian tourists. What does that mean? It means more and more Indians have disposable income to spend on tourism, on products, et cetera. This is an enormous change that's going to take place. And it's going to put actually a lot of pressure on companies to meet the demand that's coming down the road.
No, I completely agree with that, Mark. And that's a longer-term trend which hopefully will keep rising. Maybe in the very short term, since we just finished the holiday season, is perhaps also is because, some are saying that some of the Southeast Asian countries, and there's been a lot of debates online on social media, etc. It's much cheaper to travel there as compared to taking a holiday within India to some of the sort of favored destinations.
Yes.
So, Mark, just another thing. I don't know if you saw this entire controversy around H-1B. These are visas for skilled foreign workers to come and work in the US. I mean, IT services companies in India have used that for the last 25 years to send sort of Indians abroad, right, to work on projects, etc. Now, it's not just H-1B, but I mean, at least on social media, etc., from the so-called MAGA supporters, Make America Great Again, the core supporters of President Trump, right? There's been a lot of almost, and I use that word carefully, pushback, hate about sort of outsiders, and this time directed especially towards Indian workers taking up well-paying American jobs. Mr. Trump was asked that question on H-1B on the eve of New Year's, and thankfully he's kind of saying that we need highly skilled people in the US. But that's, in a way, the core base kind of sort of sounding this off in this way. Do you think, is there any risk at all? Not just H-1B, but generally attitude towards foreign workers and jobs and that kind of thing?
Well, if you look at the statements by Elon Musk and by Mr. Rabasani, who, as you know, was a presidential candidate and with an Indian background, they're both saying that students graduating from universities in the U.S. who are from India should automatically be given a green card. And I think Trump will implement that going forward because they realize that they've got to hold these very intelligent Indian students who are now becoming very capable professionals. I mean, if you look at Silicon Valley, look at how many people of Indian backgrounds, actually with Indian citizenship, are running the big tech companies in California. And I think that's going to hold true in other parts of the states. So I think the administration realized the value of the brain power that India has and will want to hang on to these people. But by the way, there's a benefit to India as well, not only because these Indians will be sending money back to India, but more importantly, they're going to obtain experience in the US and education from the US and bring that back to India because India is going to become much and more competitive in terms of offering these people good earnings. So it's going to be a win-win, I think, for these students in America. And I think it's going to be very interesting going forward. But I, for one, I'm quite optimistic about these students living and working in America.
All right. No, absolutely. And I hope that is exactly how that turns out. I think, Nigel, you have a question?
Yeah, just one more. Mark, you spoke about export-oriented themes, and there's been one stock that you have spoken to us for the last few times you've conversed as well, which is Persistent Systems. Anything new you've added in terms of, a couple of stocks, if you could name for us? I think 360, one WAM, that was another one. If you could tell us recent additions, a few stocks that you'll have in your portfolio, which you'll believe that has a longer runway?
Well, as you know, Persistent has continued to do quite well. And I think other stocks that we have in India are all doing quite well. But I believe that going forward, what I want to look at is companies that have an orientation towards the semiconductor industry. Unfortunately, we have not yet been able to isolate such companies, but we're going to look at those very carefully because I believe India is going to become a big competitor in not only low-end IT and low-end computer chips, but high-end as well. So I believe that's one sector that I want to look at more carefully. I can't give you any specific names at this stage because we're looking at that, but that's something we want to keep an eye on.
Okay, point taken. I think that will be the big story of the decade, probably. Mark Mobius, it's always a pleasure having you with us. And thank you very much for helping us inaugurate 2025 with your presence.
I just want to say 88 years young, right? I mean,
Thank you very much.
Mark, it's always great to speak with you. And I just want to add that because I just hope that...
you won't believe the way you speak that it's 88.
We have your energy and enthusiasm when we are your age. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Well, by the way, I wish you would all read my new book, The Book of Wealth, which talks not only about wealth, but about health as well. So thank you very much.
Can't be more timely. Can't be more timely, that advice. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And coming from the right person.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, touch wood anyway. Touch wood. We have